please state your name and your employment, just to give them time.
Okay. John Hungerford. I work at the DMV.
Mhm.
And I ran a small business for 25 years, which is quite a bit different than working at the DMV.
All right, let's talk about communism.
Okay. One of the big differences is in the attitude of the people. Today, the Soviet Union has fallen in 91? And so we don't expect bombs and missiles to come and fall on us. But growing up, we actually had serious family discussion. Should we build a bomb shelter? And there were family talks of, okay, we're going to store our food down here in this part of the basement, so that if we have to huddle down here from nuclear bombs, there's our place. We knew what to do. So did everybody else in the neighborhood. It was a reality.
Yeah.
We watched movies when the bombs fall, not if when the bombs fall. I rewatched them as an adult.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, there's no question about this happening.
It is
going to happen. And that's what was taught to all the children.
That's
as we were
a
growing
terrifying reality to live in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Life was a little uncertain.
If you could describe this area you were just talking about where communism was prevalent, like, first of all, what years did that kind of range from? Was it before you were born and it just continued into you being born and growing up? Did it start after you were born? Things like that.
Okay. The fear of communism, when World War II ended, the U.S. had the bomb. The Soviet Union got it just 10 years later, something like that. And so right away it was, oh no, they're coming for us. And that was a big, big deal in this country. We lived on a farm. We weren't in the city. We really expected that we'd be okay. But nonetheless, it was taught in schools. It was talked about a lot. It was just a reality of life that very well any day missiles might come. And it puts a different perspective. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but you're always aware that it's there. It might happen. Don't know when. It's like now we talk about there's the fault line off the coast. Someday, huge earthquake, Portland will be destroyed. There's people now that are panicked and have already moved out of Portland because they expect it.
Any day now.
But the rest of us just live with it. It's there in the back of our heads, but oh well. It might happen, it might not.
Yeah, and it's kind of with that, you both live in fear, but then you also can't really function if you're always fearing it.
Right.
So it's like this passive fear. It's like,
Right.
oh, we know that's there, but we're not going to always be acknowledging it directly because we have to just keep moving forward.
Yeah, the Anchorage, Alaska earthquake of 1964, 63, where downtown Anchorage dropped straight down 20 feet. A lady I met was in a supermarket when the whole building just 20 feet straight down. And
Oh, wow.
you can see the pictures. You look them up online, you can see, here's this down, here's the rest of the street up here where it was. Like, what happened?
How does that work?
Happens. It's amazing stuff. That made a big impression on me as a child. Seeing those pictures, like, that could happen here.
At any moment.
At any moment.
Oh
So,
my
pretty
goodness.
bizarre.
This was another question I had was, if you could describe this era that you grew up in 3 words, what would they be? Like it could be relating to communism directly
Oh my.
or indirectly.
Unsettled turmoil.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's 2 words. There was a lot of unsettledness. But there was also an undergirding. Always there's the undergirding. Things stay the same. But there's a lot of mess here going on. But the undergirding stays the same. And I think it was during that time period that the undergirding started to become shaky. And that scared a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because it's like in your family, I can get mad at my dad and mom and shout at them, but I'm still family. But then someday they say, you're not family anymore. Suddenly, everything is, I don't know what's going to happen now. And that's I think what our culture was going through.
Wow. Just a
Was-
very like you said, unsettling, and the foundation was kind of like ripped out from under them.
At least people became aware that it could be ripped out.
Okay.
And so there was a tension of what's going to happen, the racial issues of, I'm a white man, you're a black man, of course you're going to be subservient to me. Oh, you're not subservient anymore. I don't know how to deal with that. What am I supposed to do?
What is the new norm?
Yeah.
From your experience, how did the American government handle communism? How did they handle that from what you could see?
Okay. So growing up in high school, I subscribed to Soviet Life, which was a magazine put out by the Soviet Union.
Wow.
And you could get it for free. So great, I'd like to see it. And I studied the city of Novosibirsk, which at that time was being built from nothing in Siberia because the Soviets wanted to move a lot of things going on. Well, today I work with a lady who was born in Novosibirsk.
Oh, yeah.
And she was amazed that I knew the place. Well, there's 2 million people there. It's a huge city. And we watched it be built in high school. We studied it. And we also studied how communism works, and we studied why it's false. And we listened on our shortwave radio. I listened to the Voice of Moscow, and that was just our family. We did it for fun. But there was always that this is the enemy, and the government, like any government, said, give us more money, be loyal, don't question us, because we have an enemy. That's what all governments do when they if you don't have one, you make one, and then people obey you better. Yeah, that's what they did.
Was that the era with it's Uncle Sam, or on the poster he's like, I want you. Is that era, or was
that? Before.
A little before.
That's
okay.
before. But
similar
the
concept.
the fear of communism drove a lot. Why did we put a man on the moon? Communism. Because we can't let those Soviets, we can't let those communists get there first. And that was a big push. Our national pride, but it's freedom will get there first.
Yeah. That affected education too.
Oh,
I was
very much.
Reading that Sputnik spurred on American education to put a pressure on the sciences and math and focus on those things more than they had been, and kind of move back to those basics, because they're like, well, we can't be behind this enemy like you're talking about.
Right,
Yeah.
right. There was we often would hear them called the godless communists. It was not a popular expression, but there was an expression, kill a commie for Christ.
Wow.
I don't remember where I heard that, but it wasn't in a standard church, that's for sure.
Yeah, probably not.
But the war in Vietnam was about communism. That was its whole purpose. Now, I can look back now as an adult and say, no, it wasn't. It was about oil reserves. It was about geopolitical powers. It was about this. But it was sold as we have to stop communism from spreading.
Yeah.
My uncle and aunt were missionaries. They started in China. When the communists came, they threw them out. They went to India, and they put in wells and water systems and things in villages. So my cousins were born in China. Not too many people have cousins from China.
Definitely not.
But the fear of communism was a big thing. It wasn't China, because China was not seen as going to attack the United States. It was the Soviet Union that was going to attack the United States.
But China was involved to some degree, right?
Yes. I mean, that's what the Vietnam War. China was over here.
Okay.
And at that, they started out, the Chinese and the Soviets were working together, and then they became enemies.
Okay.
But, so there was a lot of things going on, but it was always drummed into us daily. Communism is the enemy, and you got to fight communism.
Yeah.
It was barely legal to be a member of the Communist Party in the U.S.
Wow.
It was legal, but there was a lot of back pressure, and not a pleasant place to be if you were of that bent.
With that in mind, do you feel like America's response to communism somehow resembled communism itself in a sense, with the idea of like controlling what people are perceiving and influencing the masses?
As a Christian, I am aware that all people want to control other people. We're born wanting to control. And people who are in positions of power will look around, oh, what tool can I use to get more control? Oh, I can start talking about communism, make people afraid, so I will have more power. And a lot of that was powerful people wanting more power, using the fear of communism. Communism was real, is real, and it is evil, but it had a lot of good in it also.
Explain that.
As a teenager, I got the impression that the buildings in the Soviet Union were they were all concrete, ugly, and we saw pictures of it in the paper, ugly row after row of these ugly houses, and the people were treated so badly. And that's true. But I was in Russia 5 years ago. My brother's wife is from Russia. Her father was a high communist official, her grandfather. And so I saw this big apartment building. It's like, this thing is ugly. And I looked at it and said, you know what? Yeah, it's this big ugly building. And then they got a block of park. And then they got a big ugly building and a whole other block of park. And lakes and play places. And it wasn't ugly on purpose. It was ugly because that was the cheapest material to build with, and they were desperately trying to put good houses for their people. Wow, that put a whole different perspective on it. And they've got all these beautiful open green spaces, which make it very, very pleasant. And the system of communism, the fear, the death, that's, as a government system, it sucks.
Yeah.
But the Chinese took it a whole different route. And as I was in high school, we used to say, well, if you were stuck in a communist country, which one would you want? Oh, China. Everybody wanted to be in China. We don't want to be in the Soviet Union. But that was also very bad.
So we talked about the American government. You also touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to ask, how did the American people handle or respond to communism?
So the vast majority never really were Christians, but okay, this is the way things are supposed to be. And if you don't fit that mold, you be over here on the side. We might tolerate you, but you're not this group. And what we saw in the 60s was more and more and more people said, I've had enough of this. I'm not a Christian. I don't believe in that. I'm going to stand out in the open. And you got prominent atheists and agnostics. People say, you know what, I don't want anything to do with God. And I'm okay with it. And I'm out here in the open. That was new. We've never had an American president who said, I don't believe in God. I think there were a lot who didn't.
Yeah.
But none of them ever could say it publicly, because you don't get elected if you don't. I think that day will come. So in a 3-generation jump, you move from this is terribly bad to sure, we do it every day. And 3 generations is generally what it takes. The first people say, this is wrong. These say, it's okay, but I feel uncomfortable doing it. And down here says, I think it's just great. I do it all the time. It takes that 3-generation shift to happen.
It's interesting. It sounds like that shift can happen whether or not the thing itself really is good or not.
Oh, yeah.
But that's usually how it proceeds.
So the 60s were a huge cultural shift, but it was things that were down hidden that had gradually grown, erupted in the 60s. And that, I think, is the biggest thing to remember about that period. It didn't start there. It just got uncovered there.
Yeah, that's just the first we saw what was actually going on already.
Yeah. It was all there, hidden away, ready to burst. There it went.
All right, well, thank you so much for your time,
All right.
and thank you for sharing all these wonderful things with me.
Good.
All right.